order. Honourable Speaker, point of order number 61 and 74. Honourable Speaker, I would like to actually bring to attention of this august House that there is a case before court. You might be aware, Honourable Speaker, that there were 7 women who have actually filed a constitutional redress against Electoral Registration of Voters Amendment Act and Interpretation Amendment Act, which we are actually going to be debating today. And one of them was former General Secretary of NFP. Honourable Speaker, if we actually, and this case is being presented by John Apted in the court as well. Honourable Speaker, Honourable Speaker,
Order.
Honourable Speaker, if we actually continue with this debate over here, we will be directly interfering in a court case which is still pending before the court, Honourable Speaker. We would like to actually have a ruling from you. After that, we can actually decide to either take part or not in this particular debate, Honourable Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Webb. Honourable members, I think we've gone through this in a similar case as well. When we were addressing Bill 17, But I'll ask the Honourable Attorney General to give his reply to the concern that you've raised, Honourable Webb.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, it was raised as an objection in the Bill 17, which became an Act 21, and we proceeded. And I rely again to the information of the members of the opposition. Look at your Constitution, Chapter 3, Part A, the Legislative Authority. And I'm going to read out aloud. 46.1. The authority and power to make laws for the state is vested in Parliament, consisting of members of Parliament and the President, and is exercised through the enactment of bills passed by Parliament and assented to by the President. Subsection 2. No person or body other than Parliament has authority to make any laws in Fiji, except under authority conferred by this Constitution or written law. Now, 47, subsection 1. Any member of Parliament may introduce a bill in Parliament, but only the Minister responsible for finance or another minister authorized by Cabinet may introduce a money bill as described in subsection 4. In essence, basically says, this is the reason why we are here in Parliament. We introduce bills. Okay. Let me just finish that. If that was the intention of Constitution, it would have stated here that it cannot introduce a bill if that is a matter pending in court. What has happened is this. This is the law that you made, okay? And the challenge is here. And we are waiting for decision. We are repealing the bill here, the act. So this is still a live issue before court. Thank you.
Thank you. We will move on.
Sorry for the distraction. Mr. Speaker, pursuant to the resolution of Parliament Tuesday, 11th of July 23, I move that the Interpretation Amendment Bill 2023 be debated, voted upon, and be passed.
Before I complete that process, I just want to break the ice here. This is politics, Sometimes you need to derail the train of thought of those that go out by coming up with issues that prompt you to reply and then you forget where you are. The second
Honourable Speaker, I second the motion.
And I now call on the Honourable Attorney General to speak on his motion.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Mr. Speaker, sir, the Electoral Registration of Voters Act 2020 provides inter alia for the registration of voters for general election. Before I proceed further, Mr. Speaker, sir, sorry. They are linked. Both of them are linked here. The Interpretation Act 1967 sets out the principles and rules for the interpretation of written laws and public documents in Fiji. Mr. Speaker, sir, before I proceed, may I just thank the women who are members who are sitting in the gallery, strong-minded women who fought for their right. Whilst they're waiting for the decision, these governments find the courage to change this rule. The Interpretation Amendment Act 2021, otherwise known Act number 42 of 2021, amended the Act to create a rule to provide where any written law authorizes or requires a person to provide his or her name, the person must provide his or her name as specified on his birth certificate. And where any written law authorizes or requires a person to provide any form of identification of himself or herself, the person must provide such form of identification which accurately reflects his or her name as specified on his or her birth certificate. The Act 2021 was seen to disadvantage people, namely women, who choose to use their spouse's surname when providing their name under any written law. For example, a woman using her spouse's surname on her identity documents such as passport, voter's card, driver's license, FNPF, or FOCA joint card, certificate of naturalization, practicing certificate for lawyers, accountants, and doctors. The rule created by the Interpretation Act of 2021, which was enacted by the Fiji First Party, also cost $5 million to the Ministry of Justice in the Births, Deaths, and Marriages Office, which catered for the free service provided for the application of the name of change, birth certificates and death certificates. As we have said throughout this week, Mr. Speaker, sir, this could have been government revenue and used efficiently elsewhere, such as upgrading of roads and our water system. Mr. Speaker, sir, the rule created by the 2021 law was seen to be a voter suppression. May I say it again? Voter suppression. It was reported by the Fiji Sun on the 2nd of May 2023, and I quote, "The Fiji Women Crisis Center have evidence that women were beaten up because they decided to change their names on their identity documents and let go of their spouse's surname in order to retain their maiden name as per birth certificate. And that is ridiculous for women to take their spouse's name and insert that in their birth certificate, which takes away their family maiden name." Mr. Speaker, sir, the Interpretation Amendment Bill 2023 seeks to amend the Act to remove the rule which was created by Act 42 of 2021 and allow a person to use his or her spouse's surname when providing their name under any written law. The bill must be considered by Parliament urgently, as the amendments by the Interpretation Act of 2021 set out the rule that a person must use or her name as specified on the birth certificate when providing his or her name under any written law. Given that we are now removing the rule from the Interpretation Act 1967, we have also tabled a bill that will amend the Electoral Registration Voters Act 2012 to remove the requirement that a person can only vote with the name specified on his or her birth certificate. Again, on consultation, They have been extensive. It was held at the Office of the Prime Minister, the Ministry of Finance, and the Solicitor General. These are the stakeholders that were consulted. The Fiji Women Crisis Center, some of the members are sitting in the gallery. The Fiji Women's Rights Movement, the Fiji Council of Churches, Itoke Land Trust Board, the Fiji Elections Office, the Fiji National Provident Fund, the Fiji Revenue and Customs Service, Land Transport Authority, and the Ministry of Home Affairs and Immigration. There were also public consultations, Suva, Lambasa, Lautoka, Nandi, and outer islands, including Lomaiviti. Now, Nairai and Batiki. Clause 1 of the bill provides for the short title and commencement. If passed by Parliament, the amending legislation will come into force on a date appointed by the Minister by notice in the Gazette. Clause 2 of the bill amends Section 2 of the Act to allow a married person to use her spouse's surname under any written law. As we promised the people of Fiji, Mr. Speaker said, we're going to go away with the wrong law, bad law. Accordingly, I commend this bill to Parliament. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Attorney General. And before I offer the floor, I'd like to inform you, honorable members, that I have a list here, and there's only 2 speakers that have been identified. Honorable Alitia Mbainivalu, and on the opposition it will be Honorable Usamati. So we'll continue in the betting, and they will be speaking for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on the bill, of interpretation bill. It's been quite amusing, sitting here listening to some of the comments. Maybe if I had time, I go back to it. But let's be clear. Let's be clear what was the purpose of this bill all along. Let's be clear what the purpose all along. Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, in one of the previous elections that we had in Fiji, one of our MPs on this side was actually one of the people that was at that election. It was held in Silana, in Dawasamu, and there was a complaint that was registered to this member of one of our MPs, and the complaint was this, that married women were having difficulties opening bank accounts because the name on their voter ID was different from the one on their birth certificate. Because of this, they could not open bank accounts. So what was happening, the problem was that people were having different names on different identity documents. So when you have different names on different identity documents, Honorable Deputy Prime Minister, it creates problems for those that hold those 2 different sets of documents when they go to places. It creates that problem. Also, it creates the opportunity. It makes it easier for people to misrepresent themselves as somebody else. I realize that, you guys, but all kinds of difficulties can arise as a result of this. There's also been a lady that was in Fiji. Her name was Premila Kumar. When she got her passport, this is a different Premila Kumar. When she got her passport, it was issued under her married name, which was Premila Prasad. She was in the, Chana Premila, we're both on this side. Don't worry. When she went to the United States, she came back, and then on her married name on the passport, when she had to go back to the United States, she came here, she got vaccinated. But in Fiji, the vaccination, you need to use your birth certificate name. So it is a different name. So you see, this is what happens when you have different sets of identification systems. When you have different sets of identification systems, those are the problems that arise. I looked while here this morning, I looked at the requirements in Australia for you to get a passport. It requires you to have your birth certificate name. So my wife, she calls herself Rangi Usamati. But her birth certificate name is Varadangazangi Rico Kilau, a very loud name, a name I'm very proud of. But people call her different things. Sometimes, because you have these two different sets of identity documents, it creates problems. I understand that a lot of women have had this problem. I've had them complaining to me. But at the end of the day, you have to weigh. You have to weigh the balance between the difficulties that some face and the need to be able to maintain the integrity of your identification systems. That was the purpose of this. You create all these kind of hogwash statements about what was done. Stop washing the hog. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, if you're going to change this, be prepared for the kind of problems that will follow. Be prepared for that. You will solve one problem and you create other problems. There are always unintended consequences. Mr. Speaker, sir, since my time is going up, I just want to mention a few things. The Honorable Attorney General likes to say, this thing flew in, so it shall fly out. Do you know where it flew into? It flew into Parliament. It flew into Parliament. When you denigrate that, you're denigrating Parliament and the seat of the Speaker of Parliament. When you say fly in, fly out, you're denigrating Parliament. You're a member of Parliament. Pay your respect to Parliament. Pay your respect to the leader of Parliament, to the Speaker. Honorable Pio Tigundundua said, the Australians and New Zealanders are not our Wuwale. Now, yes, you did. You did some inference. You said, why are you treating them like this and you treat everybody else like this? Do you know that in the Pacific we are all related? If you say in Duaro, Toluwa, Lima, you go to Tonga, Samoa, everywhere, it's almost the same. At the end of the day, we are all Wuwale. All Wuwale, all of us. Last thing that I'd like to say, this week we have heard the learned Attorney General like to quote this verse from the Bible, Matthew 5:7. That's a Bible verse you never quote, because every time you quote it, you indict yourself. Every time you quote it, you indict yourself. When you quoted that verse, I said, don't use it as a spear, use it as a mirror. I do not support this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
And I now offer the floor to Honorable Lalikia Bainivalu.
I make my brief contribution. Can I just please highlight that this bill and the electoral vote bill have undergone extensive public consultation, and there is no need for it to be referred to the Standing Committee, as it meets the criteria to be fast-tracked through Standing Orders 51. The Standing Committees, as it is, already have a huge backlog of work, of annual reports to review, so this process is democratic because the views of the people have already been heard. A very good afternoon to you, Honourable Speaker. The Interpretation Act of 1967 sets out the principles and the rules for the interpretation of written laws and public documents in Fiji. The amendment made in 2021 requires a person to provide his or her name as specified on his or her birth certificate as a form of identification. Honourable Speaker, this change has disadvantaged a lot of people, especially the women who chose to use their spouse's surname but were required to add a name in their birth certificate in order to be registered using their spouse's surname. Honourable Speaker, women residing in rural areas were most affected as a result of this draconic law. Those who had registered under their married name in the electoral roll were required to change their names to be consistent with their birth certificate. Otherwise, they would need to include their married name in their birth certificate. Honourable Speaker, why change something that isn't broken? Women in rural areas, in rural communities, have to take time away from their families to travel to town centres if they can afford to have the necessary changes rectified. Those who are not able to do this because of their geographical location, financially deprived, and have their little ones to attend to, were unfortunate in the process. Honourable Speaker, most women lost the right to vote because of this ridiculous process. And Honorable Speaker, I know this because I lost some votes during the general elections for my relatives residing in the interior villages of Ra. And I know now that we are going to amend this bill, they've assured me that that I have their votes come 2026 general elections. Honorable Speaker, I think this has also contributed to the lower voter participation rate of 68.3% in the 2022 general election compared to the 72% voter participation rate in the 2018 general election. As the Honorable Tisawao alluded to earlier this week, Honorable Speaker, this bill was brought because of the case about Mr. Nikona Waikula having a different name on his birth certificate and a different one on his National Register of Voters. And as the former Chief Justice ruled, he was not legally required to provide his name on his birth certificate in order to be registered as a voter. Honorable Speaker, women residing out of Fiji also have to go through the inconvenience of changing their names on their passports, property titles, driver's license, etc., because it became a mandatory requirement. Again, Honorable Speaker, why change something that isn't broken? What happened to the old convenient and practical ways of having to change names through the use of marriage certificate documents, where one can proudly use their married name on any forms of identification if they choose to? Why does names on forms of identification only have to be reflective of the names on your birth certificate? I say this, Honorable Speaker, because I was one of those who had to make this change to be eligible to vote in the last general election. Honorable Speaker, having said this, I wholeheartedly support the motion before the House. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you. And I now call upon the Honorable Attorney General to speak in reply.
It is the legacy of the Fiji First government that over the last 16 years, they make laws based on one or two incidents to solve problems by law instead of addressing the administrative issues. We all know, Mr. Speaker, sir, that the law that we're amending actually arose from one single incident. Because they cannot allow for one moment, especially my predecessor, for Nikona Waikula, a champion from Buddha, to win in it. That is the essence. Nothing more, nothing less. That is the gist. We are committed, Mr. Speaker, to right the wrongs. We listen, we consult. Look at the gallery, it's full of members of the public. Why? Ask yourself why. Today, in my maiden speech, Mr. Speaker, I said this. We're going to bring restoration. We'll create freedom. And that's exactly what we're doing today. I stand proud because in my trips overseas, this what was expressed to be by the women. Mr. Speaker, sir, that's a non-issue. We will not change our passport until Mr. AG, you change that law. These are women because they've been, if they comply with the law, they will be forced to change their identity. Karando wasa na wate rabosa indinda. Sarota manda, sarota. Let's move on. Mr. Speaker, sir, I endorse the bill.
Thank you, Honorable Attorney General. And honorable members, the Parliament will now vote. And the question is, order. Let's try and complete this. The Parliament will now vote, and the question is, pursuant to the resolution of Parliament on Tuesday, the 11th of July, 2023, that the Interpretation Amendment Bill 2023 be debated, voted upon, and be passed. Does any member oppose the motion? No member opposes the motion. The motion is agreed to unanimously. Secretary General.
Thank you.
A bill for an act to amend the Interpretation Act 1967, enacted by the Parliament of the Republic of Fiji.